can't take it anymore. You understand? I'm not going to live in this bedroom the rest of my life. I'm not happy there. So you know what?
There was a time Jenny would have done anything to stay in India. Anything. She bent over backward for years, adjusting, compromising, shrinking, just to keep her spot in Sumit's life. The woman who once clung to love through every rejection, every insult, every discomfort, is now the one who walked away first. No crying scene. No last-ditch plea. She got up and left with a peace that didn't look like anger. It looked like acceptance. This wasn't the heat of a breakup. It was the slow fade you only notice once the room goes cold. And the thing about Jenny's exit, it wasn't just physical. The leaving started long before the suitcase. It started when she stopped arguing, stopped pushing, stopped reacting. That's what emotional detachment looks like. And nothing rattles a relationship harder than when the one who used to beg for closeness suddenly chooses distance. The truth is, physical separation can bring mental clarity faster than an argument ever could. When you're outside the day-to-day survival mode, away from rehearsed excuses and emotional firefighting, you finally hear the silence. Jenny's days in India used to revolve around managing uncertainty. Would Sumit's dad accept her? Would they be forced to separate? Could they build a life? But the moment she stepped out of that house, the noise dropped. And when there's no drama keeping you busy, the emptiness of the bond becomes louder than ever. This isn't unique to Jenny and Sumit. In many long-term relationships, the absence of chaos doesn't equal peace. It exposes the truth. With nothing to fix, no fires to put out, you start realizing how exhausted you've been for years. Jenny's decision to leave wasn't sudden. It was the result of emotional attrition, 1,000 tiny letdowns that had nowhere left to hide once the daily crisis stopped. The emotional part, most people miss. Leaving doesn't always mean you've stopped loving someone. Sometimes it means you finally stopped trying to be the only one loving hard enough for two. But wait, why did Sumit still not chase her? That's the question sitting at the center of all this tension. Jenny didn't throw tantrums. She didn't give an ultimatum. She gave space. And what did Sumit do with it? Nothing. No last-minute airport rush. No book ticket to America. No desperate declaration on social media that he'll win her back. Just silence. And the silence is loud. Especially because this isn't some couple months into dating. These two got married after moving mountains to be together. So where is that energy now? If Jenny walking out didn't spark urgency in Sumit, maybe she's not the one giving up. Maybe he already had. There's a power shift unfolding here. One that feels subtle, but cuts deep. For years, Jenny was the one terrified of being left. Now Sumit is the one who could wake up to find he's the one left behind. And once that balance flips, the whole dynamic starts to collapse from the inside out. Look at Jenny's face in the last handful of scenes before she left. Not angry, not sad, just still. Her voice was softer, her eyes avoided the camera, her tone didn't rise or fall. That stillness? That's not serenity. That's someone who's been running on emotional fumes for so long, they don't even want to fight anymore. That's detachment. And detachment isn't loud. You don't see it coming. One day the things that used to trigger her, Sumit's family, the pushback, the promises with no follow-through, stop getting a reaction because the emotional grip is broken. Not by peace, but by fatigue disguised as calm. Jenny used to fight for every inch of that relationship. She'd dig her heels in with Sumit's parents, battle cultural judgment, endure loneliness in a place that never quite became home. Her life was orbiting one person, in one emotional climate, constant tension. But when someone's entire personality starts to visibly tone down like she did, it doesn't mean growth. It often means grief. She's grieving the version of this relationship that only existed in her hope. And grief, once it settles in, turns intensity down. That's exactly what we're seeing now. Detachment isn't a tantrum. It's the quiet return of self. At some point, Jenny stopped trying to be understood. She stopped repeating herself, stopped waiting for signs Sumit was evolving. She got tired of asking basic questions that always led to vague answers. And when the questions stopped, it wasn't because she got clarity. It's because she gave up needing it. That's a dangerous place for any relationship. When communication fades not from resolution, but from emotional shutdown. And that transformation is dramatic. Not in sound, but in scale. Jenny, who once needed validation just to breathe in that house, now seems entirely unbothered. That's not strength you celebrate. That's survival mode switching off. She's no longer stressed about the outcome because, internally, she's already arrived at one. The woman who invested every piece of her emotional currency in staying now, calmly got up and left. That's not indifference. That's finality sneaking in. Sumit, on the other hand, still seems to believe there's time. But the problem is, time doesn't heal what effort never touched. And Jenny wasn't asking for perfection. She was asking to not keep paying the emotional bill for both of them. When your partner stops reminding you of what hurts, it's not because the pain is gone. It's because they no longer expect it to change. And it's not what Sumit says here that shocks people. It's what he doesn't. No reaction to the shift in her tone. No visible panic about her leaving. No invitation to talk deeper, explore options, ask what she needs. Just blank space. Which, for a couple that built their bond through rebellion, confrontation, and passion, is deafening. The contrast is surreal. Jenny used to raise hell for a seat at the table. Now she's stepping away, and Sumit's barely pushing back. It's that kind of muted tension that makes you wonder whether he ever believed she'd follow through. Or maybe he did, and this is his way of quietly letting her. Either way, someone stopped protecting the connection. And from the looks of it, Jenny's finally realized she doesn't need to explain why she's done. She just needs to be gone. If Jenny's silence looked like self-protection, Sumit's looks more like suspension. Not in a peaceful way, but in the way you freeze when you have too many masters to serve and no plan that satisfies all of them. He's not panicking because, to be honest, he never truly stopped being in panic. Sumit's been emotionally split in half for years, stretched thin between chasing love and surviving family rejection. And when you live inside that constant tug of war long enough, your brain stops choosing. It just shuts down. Back when Jenny first moved to India, Sumit made countless promises. He'd get independent. He'd confront his parents. He'd build a life with her. And to be fair, he followed through, partly. They married. She stayed. Boundaries were drawn. But what Jenny kept realizing, and what Sumit never fixed, was how temporary those solutions felt. For everywhere in this together moment between them, there was a quiet caveat. Don't make him pick too hard between you and his family's approval. He might choose you publicly, but emotionally? The pull of disappointment, guilt, cultural loyalty, it never truly left. What we've seen over the seasons is a man stuck in emotional limbo. Sumit isn't cruel. He's not malicious. But he's deeply comfortable in delay. His comfort is the slow nod, the I'll try, the non-committal middle ground that allows everyone to believe progress is happening without confronting actual pain points. And that kind of behavior makes a partner feel crazy over time. Jenny wasn't asking for soulmate poetry. She wanted sustained action. But Sumit treated emotional repair like a bus schedule. Sometimes it showed up. Sometimes it didn't, but you'd be blamed for missing it either way. Now, when the marriage is sliding into real danger, he looks exhausted, flat, shrugging through scenes like he's conserving energy for problems he hasn't even named yet. And that reaction isn't new. It's a pattern of conflict paralysis. What you're watching is someone so trained in the art of not inflaming situations that he ends up quietly tolerating them until they decay. And the terrifying twist? Silence and inaction don't neutralize relationship damage. They accumulate it. There's another layer here too. Sumit grew up in a system where the consequences of disobedience weren't just personal. They were social. Familial shame, community judgment, generational duty. That stuff doesn't vanish because you've fallen in love. It creates a lifelong reflex. Don't make waves. Don't upset the hierarchy. Don't answer the hard question if you think silence might let it pass. Remember, sometimes doing nothing is the loudest answer. Sumit isn't throwing things. He's not screaming go then. He's not blocking Jenny on socials or dragging her name in the press. He's still, but stillness, in this moment, feels like surrender. Like he's already decided, quietly, that if this marriage needs clear direction, he won't be the one to give it. The same way he avoided full confrontation with his parents, he's now avoiding emotional urgency with Jenny. That reflects a brutal kind of learned helplessness. The kind you develop when every decision feels like choosing who to hurt. So instead, you choose no one. But in relationships, choosing no one always ends up hurting someone. Usually the one who loved you loudest, longest, and most visibly. And this time, that person is gone. The scariest part? He still might not register that loss until it's already official. There's a reason Jenny and Sumit's relationship has lasted longer on TV than most marriages do in real life. Their story wasn't just unusual, it was made for headlines. An older American woman falls in love with a younger Indian man she met online. They face every possible obstacle: religious tension, generational disapproval, immigration hurdles, language barriers, different expectations of marriage, family, loyalty, and they still stayed together for years. Producers don't let go of couples like that. And audiences don't either, because to the outside world, they were the underdog romance. The people who said no to rules and yes to runaway love. The ones who flipped off all logic and somehow made it work. The ones you rooted for, even when you didn't fully understand them. That's the story. That's the role they slid into. But behind the Instagram posts and the mid-season edits, something way messier was forming. Something that never fit the cameras quite right. Not cheating, not screaming matches, but quiet fatigue, political dysfunction, repeated emotional letdowns that didn't look dramatic enough to trend, but sliced deep enough to stay. Because when millions of people stake their emotional investment in your love story, it stops being just yours. You're performing it. Even when it's real, it's still curated. And that pressure is brutal when a relationship is already off balance. Every delay in growth, every shutdown, every uncomfortable pause low-key becomes content. What's a disaster to you is ratings to everyone else. So you start filtering. You start managing optics. You start making private grief look like public miscommunication. And after a while, not even you know what's real. That's exactly what started happening in Sumit and Jenny's world. Every hard conversation was also a beat in the script. Every apology doubled as damage control. What should have been off limits became monetized. They could be fighting alone in a room, but always knowing someone later would watch and react. And maybe, at some point, they became more attached to protecting the storyline than protecting each other. But that ends now. Because Jenny is back in the US, and for the first time in years, she doesn't owe anyone an update. Not production, not the viewers, not even Sumit. Her silence isn't performance, it's withdrawal. And it hits completely differently than anything we've seen before. Instagram used to be filled with selfies of them smiling in cafes, videos laughing in markets, selfies from vacations. Now, quiet. No shared posts. No celebratory anniversary captions. Not even forced positivity. And that absence is speaking fast and loud to longtime watchers who've seen the difference. Because when someone like Jenny, who has always tried to show everyone how real their love was, goes this quiet, it doesn't mean she's waiting for the next chapter. It means she might be writing a new one without him. Public love stories are a double-edged sword. They make you feel invincible when things are good, but completely trapped when things start to break. Because once you've convinced thousands of people that what you have is rare and strong and beautiful, you start believing that if it doesn't last, it somehow wasn't real. That illusion can keep people stuck. Jenny looked stuck for years, but not anymore. There's a mental shift that happens when the grief gets old, when you've already cried about it, begged to fix it, lived in the hope that it'll turn around. And the shift doesn't come with rage. It comes with surrender. Not the weak kind. The kind that says, I've done enough. I've waited enough. Now it's up to you. Or, we're done pretending. And that's the version of Jenny that boarded a plane bound for California. Calm. Collected. Finished, just not formally. What's devastating is that we've almost become too used to celebrity breakups being announced on Instagram with long captions about respect and growth. But sometimes the real ending doesn't come with a big speech. It slips in through silence. One day she was in India, and the next, she's living back in the US, reconnecting with friends, rebuilding her own rhythm, and nothing official has been posted. It's the kind of silence that's not protecting privacy anymore. It's mourning. And the moment Jenny stopped explaining herself, the shift became irreversible. Because fans who followed her since season 1 know, she's always explained. Explained why she stayed, why she forgave again, why she accepted the disrespect from Sumit's family, why she believed love was enough. She re-explained it on tell-alls, in private scenes, on social media, to every doubter, every troll, every friend who said, why are you still with him? Explaining validated her hope. But now, she doesn't seem to need it. No captions, no defense, no setting the record straight. That's not because she stopped caring what people think. It's because she's now acting like someone who knows caring won't change the outcome. Sumit, meanwhile, doesn't seem prepared for any of this. Because detachment confuses people when it finally arrives. Especially if your partner used to be the one pouring in all the effort. He might think that things will reset the way they always used to. A little space, a few calls, and a return to the emotional cycle. But you can't walk back from someone realizing their love for you required them to disappear first. Jenny's quiet is her freedom calling. And Sumit, for once, doesn't seem to know how to hold it down. That contrast between the bright, messy, passionate public story and this quiet, off-camera sadness? It's jarring. But also incredibly human. Not all breakups end in fire. Some end like this. One partner sitting in silence, the other still not realizing that love didn't die quickly. It ran out slowly. Only now do we get to see what's left when the performance ends, and only the reality remains. You could feel the shift even before she left the country. Jenny stopped asking for answers. She stopped waiting for him to step up. She stopped performing patience. The woman who once had everything on the line, her country, her comfort, her social circle, her financial safety net, is now the one holding the emotional leverage. Because here's the truth. The person with less fear always holds more power. And right now, Jenny's fear is gone. For years, everything she had was tied to Sumit. Her visa, her housing, her sense of purpose. Leaving meant risking it all, so she stayed. Even when things hurt. Even when things dragged on with no resolution. And Sumit? He knew that. Not in a manipulative way, but in an emotional economy kind of way. He didn't feel urgency to fix what wasn't working, because she never left. He never saw consequences. Only recovery. That's not love. That's complacency. But now, something's different. Jenny is no longer functioning from survival mode. She isn't reacting to crisis anymore. And when people shift from emotional reaction to reflection, the game changes. Reflection turns her into data. It turns second chances into red flags. It reframes disappointment as patterns, not accidents. And when that happens, you stop forgiving the cycle because you finally recognize it as one. Jenny being back in the States isn't a vacation. It's a reset. And in that reset, she's seeing something she hasn't felt in years. What it's like to breathe without managing someone else's emotional weight. Suddenly, her world is no longer defined by translation struggles, calendar delays, or tiptoeing around family politics. She's home, surrounded by people who already accept her existence. And nothing is more intoxicating to someone who's had to fight for basic respect than ease. Sumit, meanwhile, is still orbiting the system that taught him love has limitations. He's entangled in a culture, not just socially, but emotionally, where obligation can silence authenticity. His identity is embedded in dividing loyalty, not expressing it freely. So instead of evolving forward, he paused somewhere in the middle, not rejecting Jenny, but also never fully embracing the version of their relationship she fought to build. That long-term emotional gray zone protected him from total fallout. But not anymore. And when emotional leverage flips, the relationship cost changes with it. Jenny doesn't need to raise her voice to shift the axis. The shift is already happening. She's stepping into a version of herself that isn't asking for love, it's evaluating it. And when someone starts evaluating a relationship instead of surviving it, decisions follow. The most dangerous thing a partner can experience isn't your anger. It's your indifference. That's when actions stop being fueled by emotion and start being led by clarity. If Sumit doesn't see what's slipping through his fingers, it's not because Jenny's sending mixed signals. It's because he can't hear her silence over the noise of his own comfort. And comfort is a brutal liar. It tells you nothing's wrong until everything is gone. People are used to watching relationships fall apart with noise. A scream, a slammed door, a walk-off. Drama is easier to recognize. It tells you exactly when to be shocked. But what happens when there's no final blowout? What does the end look like when it shows up quietly, without a single person raising their voice? That's what's happened with Jenny and Sumit. No one stormed off. No one made a dramatic live stream. No angry DMs or family curses for the cameras. But something's off. And fans are starting to notice. No couple that lived half their relationship on TV disappears this completely unless something changed. No birthday posts. No travel photos. No missing you comments. Not even a casual "we're good" post to shut people up. It's been silence. But not the kind of silence where people are taking a break. This feels different. Final. Intentional. Because this silence didn't come out of nowhere. If you rewind the tape, especially across seasons, you can track it. It started slow. Jenny would talk about how she didn't feel prioritized. She'd say in interviews she felt isolated, unheard, unseen. Instead of fixing that, Sumit would give short-term comfort and then retreat back into whatever version of safety he knew. His family's expectations, his routine, his avoidance. Jenny would get maybe 1 or 2 days of warmth, then back to walking on eggshells, Think about those moments on TLC when she'd ask him a direct question like, "When are we moving out?" Or, "Why don't you stand up to your parents?" There was always a pause. A heavy pause. Sumit's face would go flat. He'd sigh. Say something vague like soon, or "I want peace," or "You have to give me time." And Jenny would nod, but her eyes were already shifting. Year after year. That's the type of erosion people don't catch while watching reality TV. Because there's usually a louder storyline in the foreground. But emotional fatigue is like a leak under the sink. It rots the structure before anyone above notices. Jenny didn't need a villain. She didn't even want revenge. She just stopped leaning in. That's when silence starts becoming more informative than words. And the longer this public silence stretches on, the more telling it becomes. Couples don't have to pose daily to prove love, but they do show up when they want to be seen. They give subtle signs. A shared selfie, an affectionate comment, a birthday wish, the bare minimum. Jenny and Sumit have erased even that. No digital trace of current emotional investment. And fans who followed them since episode 1 are realizing what that really means. This isn't about algorithm breaks or social detoxes. This is the sound of a relationship where one partner has disconnected and the other hasn't noticed the plug is out. There's also a cultural angle many Western viewers might miss. In many Indian homes, love is often quiet, restrained, non-verbal. But even in that context, you see patterns of reassurance, a small gesture, a clarified intent. When someone is fully in, even without words, their presence stays obvious. But that's missing from Sumit now. Not just in actions, but in energy. It's not just fans picking up on it, it's co-stars too. There's been nothing said at reunions or tell-alls that hints they've turned a new page. The last time we saw them on camera together, that old struggle energy was gone. They weren't arguing. They weren't clashing. They were simply apart, in posture, in tone. Like two people sharing a couch, but not sharing a future. And Jenny? She used to narrate her pain. Every frustration, she named it. Every letdown, she'd process it out loud. But the newest version of her no longer offers that access. No venting, no explanations. Because she doesn't owe the audience protection from discomfort anymore. She's not here to make her choices relatable. She's doing what people do when they're done. She's vanishing, but on her terms. This isn't the calm that comes after healing. It's the uncomfortable kind that comes before a departure gets finalized. The kind of quiet that lingers before a breakup you already processed emotionally months before making it real. And if it's this quiet, why does it feel louder than ever? Because the absence of noise often clarifies the weight of what's not being said. It pushes all the emotions into the empty space. That's what fans are hearing now. They're not watching a couple go through a crisis. They're watching what feels like the aftershock of one that already ran its course. And Jenny standing in that silence without flinching is its own kind of confirmation. The digital silence, the body language across late-stage episodes, the lack of emotional reciprocity from Sumit, the return to the States without fanfare. These aren't random. They form a pattern of endings, slow, incomplete, but real. The kind of ending where nothing was wrong enough, but everything was heavy. And nobody ever slammed the door. They just forgot to keep opening it in the first place. What feels harsh is that the love probably didn't die. It just got tired. Love can exist even when the connection is too broken to survive. That makes it harder to walk away and easier to stay too long. But at some point, even the most loyal hearts stop bleeding. And when they stop, there's no second act, no TV magic, no grand redo. There's just the reality people avoided, finally arriving with nothing left to fight for. This quiet isn't meaningless. It's the sound of a decision that already happened, and now we're just waiting to see if either of them will admit it out loud. Are they really done? That's the question that lingers under every quiet post, every missing update, every scene where no one says what they're really feeling. From the outside, it looks final. Jenny's moved. The cameras have stopped rolling. Their social feed is frozen in time. But relationships like this don't always end in clean-cut divorces. Sometimes they live in limbo for years, floating between collapse and continuation. Because even after the energy goes flat, attachment can still linger. Emotional burnout doesn't always kill the bond. It paralyzes it. The love might still be there, buried under frustration, fatigue, and silence. But love alone has never been the problem. The actual issue is the endurance gap. Jenny doesn't want to survive the relationship anymore. She wants to live in it. And that means no more clinging, no more waiting, no more deferring her life while Sumit figures himself out. If there's ever going to be a reset, it needs to look like action, not apologies. Real recovery requires both people showing up differently. That means total honesty, visible consistency, and actual structural change. Not another vague promise to try harder. Not another excuse about timing or culture or family pressure. Jenny would need to see Sumit choose her. Not just say it when it's safe, but prove it when it's hard. But so far, there's no sign either of them has the emotional gas left to start that engine again. No one is sending ultimatums. No one is rallying friends to talk sense into the other. Not even a late-night post hinting at regret. It's the stillness that says everything. Not bitter, not brutal, just done, maybe. But here's the catch. Rock bottom doesn't always come with a bang. Sometimes it's this, the gentle unraveling, the quiet inhale of freedom. The moment you realize no one's coming to pull the pieces back together. And maybe neither of you wants to ask them to. This was never just about a couple beating the odds. It was about what happens when love dares to exist in a place it was never supposed to survive. Jenny and Sumit weren't some temporary romance stitched together for attention. They built something real, if not always stable, then undeniably deep. And with all its flaws, their story pulled in anyone who's ever tried to fight for something bigger than themselves. Because that's what it was, at its core. A love that tried to prove everyone wrong. And in many ways, it did. They got further than most people predicted. From secret dating to a public relationship, from hiding their reality to marrying on screen. They stretched the definition of what possible looks like in cross-cultural love. They made people uncomfortable, then made them emotional. They created a narrative big enough to make space for others like them to be seen. But here's the quiet truth. Not all love stories are meant to last. Some are meant to teach, to stretch, to transform. And when that purpose is served, holding on too tightly becomes less about love and more about fear. Fear of failure. Fear of regret. Fear of saying, I gave that story everything I had, and realizing it still wasn't enough. For Jenny, letting go doesn't erase everything she built. It affirms it, because the version of her who fought for this relationship was brave. She loved without apology. She risked more than most people would. But somewhere along the way, the fight stopped feeling like passion and started feeling like pressure. The commitment began to look like erasure. And when that tipping point arrives, the bravest thing someone can do isn't stay, it's stop. And for Sumit, the struggle of choosing never really ended. He was caught between two worlds so long, they blurred into inertia. His identity became tied to appeasing both, Jenny asking for progress, his family asking for tradition, and in trying to satisfy neither completely, he preserved the conflict instead of resolving it. That's where shared crisis becomes dangerous. It can look like intimacy, because you're always facing something together. But when that external threat goes quiet, you're stuck with only each other. And if the glue was always survival, then peace becomes unbearable. Jenny and Sumit survived so much that it kept them bonded. But survival doesn't translate to stability. And love built in war needs more than peace to grow. It needs readiness. It needs real partnership. Because lasting relationships don't confuse urgency with intimacy. They don't rely on constant stakes in order for feelings to feel real. They breathe. They evolve. They make room for both people to exist fully without shrinking. And over the years, what Jenny seemed to lose in this relationship was exactly that. Room. Not because Sumit was unkind, but because he was indecisive. And indecision, long-term, becomes its own form of neglect. None of this makes their time less meaningful. Their legacy isn't a failure, it's a window. For tens of thousands of people watching, Jenny and Sumit opened a conversation that's bigger than themselves. They allowed the world to witness what many cross-cultural relationships experience, but rarely have the language for. The grief of being in love when your environment doesn't want you to be. The quiet heartbreak of having to explain your worth, your choices, your loyalty, again and again, until it wears you down. Their story will be remembered, not just for the controversy, or the sacrifices, or the travel, but for the courage it took to let us see the entire thing. Not the filtered parts, the messy parts, the long silences, the disappointments, the determination. And now, maybe the goodbye. Breakups are rarely one moment. They're dozens of little missed chances, quiet turning points, faded effort, and eventually, closure that doesn't need to be declared out loud. That's where we are now, watching the shape of something that may already be over, even if no one said the word yet. And that doesn't reduce what Jenny and Sumit had. In some ways, it makes it more human, because endings don't always mean love wasn't real. Sometimes, it means love was the only real part in a structure that couldn't hold it. Maybe they'll reunite. Maybe they'll find new ways to grow back toward each other. Or maybe they'll carry what they had as a chapter that was only meant to do what it did. Transform both of them for the next version of who they're going to be. Either way, this isn't a story about losing. It's a story about finally seeing things clearly, without filters, after years of trying to force them into the frame. And if you think this was wild, wait until you hear what's happening with Next Couple T's Redacted.